My mother-in-law-to-be Eleanor ascended the stage at my wedding and made a declaration. If I didn't sign away my rights to the family's 10 Manhattan condos, the marriage was off. I silently signed my name and walked to the microphone. My fiancé Michael thought I was about to give a speech of thanks. Instead, I had 3 announcements of my own. A romantic atmosphere filled the grand ballroom of the Astoria. Rainbow-hued lights glittered across the ceiling and soft orchestral music drifted through the air. As everyone was basking in this blissful moment, Eleanor Thompson glided onto the stage with elegant steps. In her hand was a thick sheaf of papers, the crisp edges gleaming under the spotlights. She stood center stage wearing the gentlest of smiles, but the words that came out were exceptionally sharp. "My dear Chloe," she began, her voice amplified throughout the hall. "Let's get the unpleasant business out of the way first, shall we?" Every eye in the room turned to us. I looked at the document with a mixture of curiosity and rising tension. The agreement stated in no uncertain terms that I was to forfeit any and all inheritance rights to the Thompson family's entire real estate portfolio, specifically 10 condominium apartments in Manhattan. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably, and my heart hammered against my ribs, but I clenched my jaw and did not refuse. With everyone watching, I slowly took the pen and signed my name. The moment the nib touched the paper, a wave of enthusiastic applause erupted from the guests. Eleanor nodded in satisfaction, an expression on her face that said everything was under her complete control. She descended the stage gracefully and returned to her seat, murmuring, "Now you may continue with the ceremony." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Then step by step, I walked toward the microphone. Michael looked at me with an expectant smile, assuming I was about to offer my gratitude. The guests all leaned in, waiting for my words. I gripped the microphone tightly and spoke, my voice ringing out clearly across the ballroom. "Everyone, I have 3 things to announce." The music stopped. A stifling silence fell over the room. I had watched Eleanor Thompson make her way to the stage. She was wearing a custom-made deep violet Oscar de la Renta gown, the fabric shimmering the pattern intricate and opulent. Her hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her face adorned with a flawless smile that conveyed an air of poised dignity. The wedding officiant stood awkwardly to the side, a look of complete bewilderment on his face. Michael grabbed my hand urgently. His palm was slick with sweat. "Mom, what are you doing?" he whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. From her exquisite handbag, Eleanor produced the bundle of documents. It was thick, the edges perfectly aligned. She approached me and gently took my other hand. Hers was warm and impeccably manicured, a glittering diamond ring on her finger. "Chloe, darling, don't be nervous," she said into the microphone, her voice echoing crisply through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, thank you for your patience." Her gaze swept slowly across the room, exuding an air of absolute command. "Today is the wedding day of my son Michael and my daughter-in-law Chloe. As a mother, I wish for their happiness more than anyone." Scattered applause came from the audience, though many were still whispering amongst themselves. I glanced at my parents' table. Their faces were grim. My father's brow was furrowed, and my mother's lips were pressed into a thin, hard line. "But a happy marriage," Eleanor continued, "is built not just on emotion, but on honesty." She held up the documents in her hand. "Michael is our only son. Our family is fortunate enough to be quite comfortable with 10 condos here in Manhattan." A ripple of impressed murmurs went through the crowd. Someone let out a soft wow. I looked at Michael, hoping for an explanation, but he avoided my gaze, staring down at the tips of his polished shoes. "I am not some wicked, old-fashioned mother-in-law," she declared. "I simply wish for their love to be pure. That is why our family has prepared this agreement." She presented the document to me. The cover page read, "Prenuptial Asset Declaration. Chloe, if you sign this and waive any claim to the 10 properties, the Thompson family will immediately welcome you as our own daughter." Her voice was as soft as a spring breeze. This was Michael's wish as well. "We just wanted to see if you truly love him or if you love the Thompson family money." A dead silence fell over the hall. Every guest's cell phone was raised high, their lenses pointed directly at me. My face burned as if it were being held over a fire. I could hear my own heartbeat, a frantic thump, thump, thump like a drum with a torn skin. I instinctively looked to my parents. My father's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, full of hurt. I turned back to Michael. He finally lifted his head slowly to look at me, his eyes pleading. "Chloe, sign it," he mouthed, his voice a trembling whisper. "It's just a formality. Just do it for my mom's sake. We can have a good life together after this." I looked at him silently. Suddenly, the man standing before me felt like a complete stranger. We had dated for 3 years. I thought I knew him. Just then, Eleanor pressed a fountain pen into my hand. It was cold and the chill seeped from my palm straight to my heart. Chloe, all the guests are watching. Don't make this awkward for everyone. The smile on her face remained unchanged, still impossibly sweet, but in her eyes I saw a flicker of contempt and a glint of satisfaction. She was admiring her prize before it was even in her possession. I took a deep breath. My chest felt tight and heavy, as if a large stone were pressing down on it. Without a word, I lowered my head and opened the agreement. The clauses inside were far harsher than I had imagined. It wasn't just about the premarital real estate. I was also to automatically forfeit ownership of any property acquired after the marriage. In the event of a divorce, I would leave with nothing. I would even be responsible for half of any debt Michael incurred during our marriage. From a table where the Thompson relatives were seated, someone couldn't hold back a snicker. The sound was like a needle, sharp and piercing. I flipped through the pages one by one until I reached the end. In the bottom right corner, Michael's signature was scrawled in a flamboyant script. The date was yesterday's. So this wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a carefully planned trap, and I was the lamb being led to the slaughter without a fight. I slowly closed the agreement. I didn't look at anyone. I lifted the pen Eleanor had given me. The nib hovered over the paper for a moment. I heard Michael let out a quiet sigh of relief. He thought I would yield. Everyone thought I would yield. After all, the Thompson family had 10 condos, and in their eyes, I was just a girl from a middle-class family from out of state. Marrying Michael was a luxury far beyond my station. I was supposed to be grateful to endure any and all humiliation. I gripped the pen and began to write. Chloe Evans. That is my name. I wrote it carefully, stroke by stroke, very slowly, pouring all my strength into each letter, as if channeling all the resentment and fury in my heart onto the page. The pen made a faint scratching sound, nearly tearing the paper. Finally, after the last stroke, I slowly capped the pen. It made a soft click. In the suffocatingly quiet ballroom, the sound was unnaturally loud, like a single pebble dropped into a still lake. The smile on Eleanor's face widened instantly. It was a carefully constructed mask, and now it looked particularly jarring. She nodded with satisfaction and snatched the agreement from my hand without even a glance at me. Then she turned and held it up for the guests to see, as if showing off a rare treasure. What a good daughter-in-law, she announced loudly, her voice clear and strong, echoing through the hall. I knew Chloe was a good girl. She continued, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The Thompson family table immediately erupted in thunderous applause. They clapped with feigned smiles as if completing a well-rehearsed play. Soon the entire ballroom was filled with applause. But this wasn't a blessing. It was the cheer of spectators, the excitement of a crowd watching a spectacle, a form of charity bestowed from on high. They were condescendingly granting me their so-called approval, as if my obedient signing of this agreement was something worthy of praise. Michael approached me with a radiant smile, his arms open to embrace me. His lips were curved upwards, but his eyes held a look of entitlement. Chloe, I knew you were the most reasonable one, he said softly. I instinctively took a step back. My gaze was cold. His arms closed on empty air, and the smile on his face froze into an awkward expression. Eleanor walked gracefully off the stage, and treating the agreement like a precious artifact, carefully handed it to the Thompson family lawyer. Her eyes were filled with a sense of preciousness. Then she returned to the main table, sat down elegantly, picked up her teacup, and gently blew on the steam. Well, Mr. Efficient, please continue, she said nonchalantly, her tone carrying an unchallengeable authority, as if the entire ordeal had been nothing more than a trivial interlude. The officiant, after a few seconds of stunned silence, snapped back to reality with a flustered look. Yes, yes. Let's once again congratulate the happy couple, he said, trying to restore the atmosphere, but his voice trembled slightly. But I didn't move. I stood my ground firm and unyielding. I didn't return to Michael's side. Instead, I turned and walked toward the other lectern on the stage. There was another microphone there, as if waiting for me to pour out the words in my heart. Michael rushed over and grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into my skin. Chloe, what are you doing? He demanded, his brow furrowed, his eyes filled with suspicion and displeasure. Stop playing around. The ceremony isn't over. His tone was forceful, demanding my obedience. I wrenched my arm free from his grasp. The movement was sharp and decisive. He hadn't expected my strength and stumbled, nearly falling over. Every eye in the hall was on me again. The once raucous applause had abruptly stopped. Everyone stared at me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and curiosity, as if watching an actor who had suddenly gone off script. I slowly picked up the microphone. It felt heavy in my hand, and the cold touch of the metal helped clear my head. I tested it. My voice came through the speakers unwavering, clear, and stable. It was a declaration of my resolve. Michael's face changed color. It flushed a deep red and his eyes blazed with anger. "Chloe, what the hell do you think you're doing? Put the microphone down," he shouted, his voice laced with panic. At the main table, Eleanor Thompson also frowned. She set down her teacup and shot me a sharp glare, a look so intense it felt like it could pierce through me. I ignored them. I looked down at the guests with their phones held high at my parents with their worried faces. Their eyes were filled with pain and helplessness. I smiled and gave them a slight reassuring nod. Then I slowly brought the microphone to my lips. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming to my wedding today." My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone present to hear distinctly. I would like to pause the ceremony for a moment, because I have 3 things I would like to formally announce. First, I stared at Michael with a steely gaze. His face was contorted with tension, his brow knitted tightly, and tiny beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. I, Chloe Evans, hereby formally declare that the wedding between myself and Mr. Michael Thompson is from this moment officially canceled. As soon as the words left my mouth, the room was plunged into a deathly silence. The air seemed to freeze. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After a few seconds, the hall erupted in a chaotic buzz like 1,000 bees swarming by my ears. Michael, his face contorted in a furious snarl, lunged at me, trying to snatch the microphone away. "Chloe, are you insane? What nonsense are you talking about?" he yelled. I sidestepped him nimbly. At that moment, the venue's security guards, whom I had arranged beforehand, rushed onto the stage and formed a barrier between us. It was a precaution in case he lost control and became violent. Blocked by the guards, all he could do was swing his arms in the air and scream at me. Eleanor shot up from her seat, the chair screeching as it was pushed back. The calm elegance on her face vanished in an instant, replaced by shock and fury. "Chloe Evans, how dare you?" she shrieked. "You signed the agreement, and now you're going back on your word. It's too late for that." I curved my lips into a small, cool smile. "Mrs. Thompson, I think you've misunderstood. I didn't sign that agreement to continue this wedding. I signed it to end it. Now for my second announcement." I paused my gaze, slowly sweeping over the stunned faces of the Thompson relatives below the stage. Some had their mouths hanging open. Others' eyes were wide with disbelief. For this wedding, I prepared a special gift. I had originally planned to give it to Mr. Michael Thompson as a surprise at the end of the ceremony. Eleanor scoffed, contemptuously crossing her arms. "A gift? What kind of gift could you possibly prepare? That tiny rundown apartment your parents live in." Her relatives around her began to laugh along. Some bent over cackling. Others pointed. They were convinced I was just putting on a brave front. I ignored her mockery, my expression perfectly calm. I took a small USB drive from my handbag and, with a natural motion, handed it to a nearby stagehand. "Excuse me," I said, with a smile. "Could you please play the file on this drive?" The stagehand took the USB and quickly plugged it into a laptop. A few seconds later, the massive LED screen behind me lit up. Displayed on the screen was a scanned copy of a stock transfer agreement. "This is for 15% of the initial shares in a tech startup held under my name." My voice carried clearly through the microphone to every corner of the ballroom. "For those of you who might not know, this company just closed its Series B funding round last month." I continued, my voice ringing out from the stage. "Its current valuation is $50 million. The numbers on the screen were large and clear. The zeros felt like a series of slaps to the face. I added with a smirk. "My 15% stake, calculated at market value, is worth a staggering $7.5 million. The laughter that had filled the hall just moments before died instantly. Everyone stared wide-eyed at the screen. Eleanor was frozen in her seat, her face turning a ghastly shade of pale. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a single word. I went on. "This stock transfer agreement is signed over to Mr. Michael Thompson." Whispers started to break out in the crowd. "What's going on? There must be more to this story." I raised my voice. It was meant to be my wedding gift to him. But now I hereby declare this gift, along with all my hopes for this marriage, null and void. I looked at Michael. He stood there stunned, as if struck by lightning. The color drained from his face. First there was shock and disbelief, then a frown of regret, and finally a look of utter soul-crushing despair. He was finally realizing that he hadn't just lost an obedient wife. He had thrown away a gold mine. And now for my third and final announcement. My gaze lingered on his face for a moment longer. It was a look devoid of any warmth. I stared directly at him and said, "Mr. Michael Thompson, 3 years ago when your business failed and you were drowning in debt, who was it that helped you? It was me. I gave you $500,000 so you could establish the company you have today." As I finished speaking, the image on the screen changed. A promissory note appeared. Black text on white paper, crystal clear. The borrower, Michael Thompson. The amount $500,000. Below were his signature and a red official-looking stamp. "As you can all see," I said, pointing to the screen, "the repayment date is today, and this promissory note is notarized. According to the agreement, you are to repay the principal today, along with interest calculated at 4 times the bank's prime lending rate, bringing the total to $750,000. I paused for a moment before adding, "I will give you 1 month. If the money is not in my account after 1 month, my lawyer will immediately file for enforcement with the court. At that point, your company, your car, and everything in your name, including those condos your parents bought for you, will be seized." After saying this, I quietly placed the microphone back on its stand. The world was terrifyingly silent. The silence lasted for 3 seconds. Then the ballroom exploded into chaos, as if a bomb had gone off. The first to break was Eleanor Thompson. She sat there, the last bit of color draining from her face. Her once well-maintained features contorted in extreme rage and horror like a crumpled piece of paper. She shot up from her chair and shrieked at the top of her lungs, "It's fake! It's all fake!" She let out a sharp, piercing scream that felt like a dagger to everyone's eardrums. With a twisted face, she pointed a trembling finger at me, then at the giant screen behind me. Her finger shook violently like a dry leaf in an autumn wind. "That cheap little she," screeched. "She's lying." She forged the evidence. After her outburst, she tried to charge the stage. A few of the Thompson relatives quickly grabbed her. She thrashed about like a mad lioness. A button on her designer dress popped off, revealing the red lingerie underneath, creating a pathetic spectacle. The once elegant matriarch, who seemed to have the world at her fingertips, was now just a hysterical mess. Michael's reaction was a beat slower. He first stared intently at the promissory note on the screen, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief, as if he could burn a hole through it with his furious gaze. A moment later, he suddenly turned to me. His eyes were filled with a look of complete devastation and supplication. With a loud thud, he dropped to his knees. In front of hundreds of guests, under the glare of countless flashing cell phone cameras, he knelt directly before me. "Chloe, I was wrong," he wailed, his voice breaking. "Chloe, I was so wrong." Crying, he began to crawl toward me on his knees. Tears and snot covered his face, creating a truly pathetic sight. The knees of his expensive suit dragged across the soft carpet, leaving miserable scuff marks. "Forgive me. Please forgive me," he begged repeatedly. "That agreement. It wasn't what I wanted. It was all my mom. She made me do it." His voice, choked with sobs, echoed through the hall. "I love you, Chloe. I love you." I looked at him coldly, my expression unchanging. In that moment, I felt no hatred, no thrill of revenge, only a deep, bone-chilling disgust. This was the man I had loved for 3 years, the man I was once willing to entrust my entire life to. Weak, hypocritical, and utterly devoid of responsibility. For 10 condos, he had pushed me into a pit of humiliation without a second thought. For $7.5 million, he dropped to his knees and begged without hesitation. The love he spoke of, the pride he held so dear, was worthless in the face of money. The guests below were now in a complete frenzy. They were no longer whispering but discussing loudly, afraid to miss a single detail. "My God, what a twist! This is the best reality TV I've ever seen," someone exclaimed. "That guy is such a scumbag. Took her $500,000, tried to get her wedding gift, and then planned to kick her out with nothing," another said indignant. "And his mother is even worse. She thought she was picking on a lamb and found a wolf instead." Someone else snickered. "Wolf, this is a titanium-plated, diamond-encrusted wolf. This woman is incredible," another person praised loudly. The flashes from the cell phones created a sea of glittering stars before my eyes, but I remained unfazed, my gaze calm. Just then, my parents came to my side. My father's large frame stood firmly in front of me. His sturdy body was like a mountain, steadfast and reliable, completely shielding me from the ugly sight of Michael. Michael's anger, his resentment, his panic, all of it was blocked by this mountain-like barrier. My mother gently took my hand. Her palm was warm, and the warmth spread through our joined hands and into my heart. She squeezed it tightly as if to tell me she would always be there for me. "Chloe, don't be afraid. Mom and Dad are here," she whispered in my ear. I could hear a slight tremor in her voice, but what was stronger was her love for me and her unwavering protection. I squeezed her hand back and gave her a bright smile. Of course I'm not afraid. From the very beginning, I was the protagonist of this absurd play. Every scene, every twist was directed by me. I was the director. Now it was up to me to bring the curtain down on this farce. I didn't look at Michael again. I turned and took my mother's arm. "Dad, Mom, let's go home." My voice was as calm as a lake without a single ripple, as if everything that had just happened was merely a minor incident. Seeing that I was about to leave, Michael went berserk. His eyes widened and the muscles in his face twitched with fury. He screamed and tried to break free from the security guards. "Chloe, you can't go!" His voice was sharp and piercing. "You have to explain yourself. You can't just leave like this," he shrieked. The security guards were professionals I had hired. 2 of them held his arms like iron clamps, making it impossible for him to move no matter how much he struggled. Eleanor's wailing continued, growing louder and more shrill. The sound cut through the quiet air of the ballroom like a sharp blade. Her sobs were now mixed with vicious curses. "You jinx! You ruined my son!" she screamed, her face contorted with hate. "I'm not done with you!" she shrieked, trying to lunge toward me again. The Thompson family relatives were in chaos. Some were trying to hold back Eleanor and Michael, attempting to calm them down. "Please stop this. What a spectacle," one relative pleaded. Others were blaming me, their faces filled with resentment and anger. "How could you do this? This is too cruel," another relative shouted angrily. Some, wanting no part in this mess, were already trying to slip away quietly. "Let's get out of here." "Let's not get involved," one relative whispered, to the person next to them. The wedding venue had turned into a massive, chaotic scene, and I, under my father's firm protection and my mother's warm companionship, walked calmly down the bright red carpet step by step toward the ballroom exit. I didn't look back. I could feel countless eyes on my back. The gazes were complex, some trying to uncover a secret from my retreating figure, others gloating, waiting for my downfall. But none of it mattered to me anymore. The agreement I signed was not my shame. It was my declaration of war. With it, I declared war on a rotten relationship and on a greedy, selfish mother and son. Now, the war was over. I had won. As I stepped outside, the afternoon sun shone gently on my face. It felt as soft as warm sand. I took off the expensive high heels I was wearing. They had been pinching my feet from the moment I put them on. I casually tossed them into a nearby trash can. Then, barefoot, I stepped onto the cool, solid marble floor. The ground was cold, but strangely my heart felt light. I got into the car my father had waiting. As the car started and slowly pulled away from the hotel, I didn't look back at the magnificent entrance, but I could imagine the scene inside. It would be a feast more chaotic than a marketplace. Eleanor had probably gone from hysterical to completely broken. All her carefully laid plans, the intricate web she had woven with such pride, her so-called wisdom, she had considered all of it a powerful weapon to control her son's marriage and future. But who would have thought that, in an instant, this weapon would become the sharpest knife to pierce her own heart, before she had been bursting with superiority over her 10 condos. She walked with an air of arrogance, her eyes filled with disdain for others. But when the $7, $5 million in stock appeared before her, the superiority derived from those 10 condos instantly became the biggest joke in the world. She had originally schemed to kick her daughter-in-law out with nothing, employing all sorts of tactics, certain of her victory. The result was not only a failure but also saddling her son with a debt of over $700,000. This blow was like plummeting from the clouds into a pit of mud. How could this be impossible? I could almost see her slumping into a chair, her eyes as empty as a dry well, muttering, "Impossible. This is impossible." Just then, reporters having gotten wind of the story would swarm in like a tidal wave. Countless microphones would be thrust in her face. "Mrs. Thompson, what are your thoughts on this fraudulent marriage incident? How do you plan to handle your son's massive debt?" The reporters would bombard her with questions. And Michael, my ex-fiancé, his fate would be even more miserable. The loss of his dignity was just the beginning. The video of him kneeling and begging would go viral within hours, spreading through every Instagram story and TikTok feed in the city. "Look, that's the parasite. a modern-day Benedict Arnold. People would tear him apart in the comments. His so-called buddies would now look at him differently. At reunions, he would no longer be able to boast as he used to. His colleagues would point fingers at him behind his back. He would be unable to hold his head high at his own company. Even more fatal was the $750,000 debt. The promissory note was notarized and legally enforceable. The company he founded was funded by me. I knew its daily cash flow, all its assets, like the back of my hand. I knew he didn't have the ability to repay that money. His only hope was his parents' 10 condos. "Dad, Mom, please, you have to save me. Sell the condos to pay off this debt," Michael would plead desperately. But would his parents willingly sell their properties to fill the massive hole they had dug with their own greed? Even if they were willing, would the Thompson relatives, the same relatives who just today were praising their foresight and shrewdness, agree? Humph. Served them right for being so arrogant. Now that trouble's here, they have to deal with it themselves. This money must be repaid. We can't take a loss. The relatives would instantly turn into creditors demanding their share. I knew that world all too well. Everyone loves to add flowers to a brocade when you're successful. They hover around you, showering you with compliments. But they are even better at turning their backs on you when you're down. The moment you run into trouble, they run faster than anyone ready to rub salt in your wounds. I could predict that an unprecedented war would break out within the Thompson family. It's all because you're so weak that things got to this point, and because of that vicious woman, Eleanor would blame everything on Michael's weakness and my wickedness. All you know is how to scheme. You're foolish. And greedy. Now look at the mess you've made. Michael's father, the man who had been silent throughout, would unleash his fury on Eleanor's foolishness and greed. Husband and wife would turn against each other. Mother and son would become enemies. They would blame each other, their arguments filling the house. Their lives from this day forward would never know peace. And those wedding guests, they had gotten the hottest story of the year. That wedding man, it was epic. Yeah, it had all the drama you could ask for. They would gather together, exaggerating and spreading every detail of the wedding. I, Chloe Evans, would become a legend known to all as a woman not to be trifled with, and the Thompson family would become the biggest laughingstock in the city for the next year. And who would bear the losses of the hotel? Hundreds of tables of expensive, untouched banquet food. Every dish was exquisite, but now it was all just slowly getting cold. The pre-booked top-tier suite luxuriously decorated but now empty, and the venue rental fee, half of which had already been paid. All of this would become a collection notice, flying straight to the beleaguered Thompson family. I could vividly imagine the hotel manager with a grim face holding a bill and finding Eleanor Thompson. Eleanor would stare with wide, resentful eyes but would be unable to say a word. After that, the Thompson family would surely descend into chaos. Family members would start fighting, blaming each other. Someone would be stomping their feet, someone would be crying, someone would have a complete breakdown. The scene would be like a symphony I had composed just for them. I leaned against the car window, watching the rapidly passing streetscape. The trees flew by, and the shop signs vanished in a flash. Suddenly, my phone started buzzing incessantly. Without looking, I knew it was Michael. He would undoubtedly be blowing up my phone, sending hundreds of messages. The content would be apologies, admissions of his wrongdoing, and remorse. He would reminisce about our beautiful past. He would plead for me to come back to him. Perhaps there would be curses calling me heartless. Even threats saying I would regret leaving him. He would surely use our 3-year relationship as a hostage, saying we loved each other too much to end it like this. He would also threaten me with his miserable future, saying he couldn't live without me. But none of it meant anything to me anymore. Like the scenery flashing past the car window, no matter how familiar it once was, what's past is past. I didn't answer the calls, nor did I read the messages. I just quietly looked at this city. The sunlight spilled onto the streets, warm and inviting. The sky was blue and the clouds drifted by like cotton candy. A whole new world of my own was waiting for me up ahead. The car was quiet, with only the sound of the engine humming. My father focused on driving his eyes on the road ahead. My mother held my hand tightly the entire time. Her hand was a little cold. After a long while, my mother finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Chloe, you silly girl, why didn't you tell us about this beforehand?" She was referring to the $7.5 million in stock and the $500,000 loan. I turned my head to look into her worried eyes. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes, and her gaze was filled with concern. My heart ached a little. I said in a low voice, "Mom, I didn't want to worry you." And I always thought these were just safety nets, things I would never have to use. I knew Michael liked luxury brands and showing off in front of his friends, so he was a bit vain, but I thought his heart was in the right place, that he wouldn't do anything too outrageous. I thought our relationship could withstand his mother's cheap tricks. I thought if I was good to him, made him breakfast, and cared about his work, he would be good to me, take care of me when I was sick. Now I see I was completely wrong. My father glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes full of concern. He said in a calm tone, "You did the right thing. Some people need a hard slap to remember who they are. Just remember from now on, whatever decision you make, you're not alone. You have us." He rarely said such warm things, but each word landed like a heavy hammer striking my heart. Yes, I wasn't alone. I was never alone. No matter how high or how far I flew, home would always be my final refuge, my strongest support. "I know, Dad," I nodded forcefully. Just then, my mother reached over to tidy my messy hair and sighed softly. "That Michael, he's truly blind. To let go of a girl as good as our Chloe." She didn't finish her sentence, but the anger and relief in her eyes were clear. She was furious at Michael's betrayal and relieved that I had cut my losses in time. I took out my phone and looked at the screen. There were already hundreds of missed calls and dozens of text messages, all from Michael. I casually opened one. "Chloe, I'm begging you, give me one more chance. I'll cut ties with my mom right now. We can have a good life, just the two of us. I'll listen to everything you say. The money, I don't need any of it. I just need you." I opened another. "Why are you doing this to me? Was our 3 years together worth so little to you? You've ruined me, you vicious woman." And another. "Chloe, I was really wrong. I can't live without you. If you don't answer my call, I'm going to jump off the hotel roof." I looked at these messages with a blank expression. From pleading to cursing to threatening, what a familiar and ridiculous pattern. I showed the phone to my mother. She took one look and her face turned pale with anger. "Don't engage with him. A man like that is capable of anything." "Are we there yet?" I smiled and took the phone back from her. I didn't reply to any of Michael's messages. In front of my parents, I found his contact in my phone. I long pressed it, then deleted and blocked him. Phone, social media, every means of communication between us was severed by my own hand at that moment, cleanly without a trace of hesitation. After finishing all this, I dialed another number. It was my personal lawyer, Mr. Davies. The call connected quickly. "Miss Evans, I trust the wedding went smoothly, Mr." Davies's voice had a hint of a smile in it. "Mr. Davies, the wedding has been canceled," I said, my voice as calm as a placid lake. There were a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. "What happened? I need you to handle 2 things for me immediately. First, send a formal letter of demand to Mr. Michael Thompson, requiring him to repay the $500,000 loan, plus the interest specified in the contract for a total of $750,000 within 1 month. I will email you all the relevant notarized documents shortly. Second, prepare for legal proceedings. If the amount is not received after 1 month, immediately apply to the court for an asset preservation order and freeze all assets under his name, including his company accounts, vehicles, and real estate. I want to leave him with nothing." My tone was cold, almost ruthless, devoid of any warmth. Mr. Davies was an experienced professional. Hearing my decisive tone, he didn't ask why, but replied firmly and concisely. "Understood, Miss Evans. I'll get right on it." He hung up. I leaned back in my seat and took a deep breath. The last knot of tension in my heart seemed to slowly unravel. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply taking back what was originally mine. The car slowly crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. The sunlight scattered on the water, sparkling like countless shattered diamonds. I slowly rolled down the window. The wind whistled in, carrying the fresh scent of the river, and gently brushed against my face. "This feels good," I murmured to myself. I could finally live for myself. Back home, I quietly closed the door. With a soft click, I finally felt alive. The noise, the chaos, the malice of the outside world were all shut out by this single door. The house was just as I remembered it. The floors were so clean you could see your reflection. The furniture was neatly arranged, filled with the scent of home. My mother heard me and hurried out of the kitchen, still holding a dish towel. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. She rushed to find my old slippers and placed a glass of warm water in my hands. "Here, drink some water and calm down," she said softly. "Dinner will be ready soon. I made your favorite lasagna." Her voice was gentle and cautious, as if I were a delicate piece of porcelain that might break at the slightest touch. My father came out of his room, silently took my suitcase to the entrance, then sat on the sofa and turned on the TV, but kept the volume very low. He would occasionally glance at me, his eyes filled with concern. I held the glass, feeling the warmth spread from my palms. The warmth slowly seeped into my heart. "Dad, Mom, I'm okay," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I really was. Once I was out of that toxic environment, my mind and body were quickly returning to normal. That farcical wedding, thinking back on it now, was like a ridiculous movie, and I was just a member of the audience who had left early. My mother's eyes reddened and she nodded vigorously. "As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. That family. From now on, they have nothing to do with us." My father also spoke, his face stern. "If they dare to bother you again, I won't let them get away with it." I looked at them and my heart warmed. I suddenly felt like laughing. The $500,000 loan, the $7.5 million in stock, I had never told them about any of it. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I didn't want them to think my marriage was entangled in such complex financial calculations. I wanted them to see me marrying for love. But reality had slapped me in the face. Thankfully, that slap had completely woken me up. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. When I answered, I heard the excited, hushed voice of a girl on the other end. "Chloe Evans, right? It's Jessica Miller from college. I was at the wedding today." I was sitting pretty far back, but oh my God, you were absolutely amazing today. I was stunned for a moment before I remembered the name. Today was so satisfying. The video is going viral in our alumni group chat right now. Jessica's voice was like a machine gun, rapid fire with excitement. "Everyone is calling you the goddess of revenge." Michael Thompson and his mom totally had it coming. When I was leaving, I saw his mom had fainted and they even called an ambulance. And their relatives were fighting with the hotel staff over the reception bill. It was a total disaster. Jessica recounted the entire follow-up situation to me. "Chloe, you did the right thing. You can't go easy on scumbags and a monster-in-law like that. All of us are cheering for you." After hanging up, I felt no great ripples in my heart. All of this was in fact within my expectations. Eleanor fainting, the Thompson family in chaos. This was just the first price they were paying for their greed and stupidity. Meanwhile, in the Thompsons' luxurious penthouse apartment, things were already in shambles. A priceless porcelain vase had been smashed on the floor, its shards scattered everywhere. Eleanor Thompson sat slumped on the sofa, her hair disheveled. She had just returned from the hospital, her face devoid of color, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, as if she had lost her soul. Michael's father, Robert Thompson, usually a man of few words, was now pacing the living room in a rage, his face ashen. "You useless fool, you start a fire and you can't even put it out." He finally exploded, pointing a finger at Eleanor's nose and cursing. "I told you from the beginning that Chloe Evans wasn't a simple girl. You only saw her surface, only saw that her parents were ordinary retired workers. Is your head filled with water? Now look what you've done. We couldn't even keep our own condos. We've lost all face. $7.5 million. Do you think that's $700? And a $750,000 debt. How am I supposed to pay that? Sell the house. The Thompson family's reputation is completely ruined because of a damn woman like you." Hearing the abuse, Eleanor flinched and snapped back to reality. She shot up, screeching like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "You're blaming me, Robert Thompson. You have the nerve to blame me. When I first proposed this plan, you nodded and agreed too. Now that things have gone wrong, you're pinning all the blame on me. It's your son who's incompetent, who couldn't even hold on to a woman. How is it my fault that things have come to this?" Michael had been sitting in a corner like a wooden statue. Hearing this, he snapped his head up. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with fury. "Mom, you still think this is my fault? If you hadn't caused such a scene at the wedding, would we be in this mess? It's all your fault. You ruined everything for me." The family instantly turned on each other, tearing each other apart like rabid animals. Just then, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper, like a frightened little bird, went to open the door. A young man in a courier's uniform stood there holding a document. "A delivery for Mr. Michael Thompson. It's a certified letter. I need a signature." The courier stood at the door, polite yet robotic. The word certified letter struck the hearts of the 3 Thompson family members like a heavy hammer. Michael's hand trembled. He slowly reached out his hand, feeling as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. He barely managed to take the envelope. His eyes were filled with terror and panic, and his lips trembled uncontrollably. He sat on the sofa, his shaking hands tearing open the document. Black text on white paper. The wording was meticulous and severe. Every sentence was like a cold blade cutting into his heart. Loan principal $500,000. Interest $250,000. Total $750,000. Failure to pay within 1 month will result in legal proceedings and an application to the court for compulsory enforcement. When Michael saw the words compulsory enforcement, his vision went black and his head spun. He could no longer support himself and collapsed onto the sofa. His face turned deathly pale in an instant, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He muttered, "It's over. It's over." Eleanor rushed over and snatched the document. She took one look, and her eyes widened in an instant. Then, she let out a blood-curdling scream so sharp it could pierce a person's eardrums. Her eyes rolled back, and her body went limp, collapsing to the floor. This time, she had truly fainted. Michael held the paper, his hands shaking like a leaf in the wind. The paper rustled in his hand. His body trembled along with it, his teeth chattering. He knew Chloe Evans wasn't joking. His world had come crashing down. When Eleanor woke up again, she was lying in her bedroom. The maid had just left, and the faint smell of medication still lingered in the air. She slowly opened her eyes. She expected to see the worried faces of Robert and Michael, but what met her eyes were two faces filled with disgust and annoyance. Robert's brow was furrowed, his eyes full of contempt. Michael had turned his head away, not even wanting to look at her. Her heart sank to the bottom. But then an even stronger sense of hatred surged through her. She bit her lip so hard that it bled. I can't let it end like this. Her lifetime of cleverness and pride couldn't be destroyed by a single young girl. She shot up from the bed. Her hair was a mess, and a crazed glint appeared in her eyes. I won't lose. That little tramp set us up. Yes, that must be it, she said nonsensically, as if grasping at straws. That $500,000, she gave it to Michael willingly. It was a gift, not a loan, and that stock, it must be fake just to scare us. She's determined to ruin our Thompson family. The more she spoke, the more agitated she became, her face flushing red. Robert looked at her coldly, his eyes filled with disappointment as if looking at a stranger. You're insane. That promissory note is notarized, and the stock transfer agreement was witnessed by a top law firm. How could it be fake? You still haven't learned your lesson. I'm not wrong, Eleanor shrieked, her voice hoarse. The one who's wrong is that cheap little tramp. I'm going to expose her true colors. I'll let everyone know what a cunning, vicious woman she is. Her eyes were bloodshot, her expression twisted and hideous. She pushed aside her husband and son and grabbed her phone. I will make her pay. She quickly scrolled through her contacts and found the number of a YouTuber who specialized in exposing social scandals. Hello, is this the Daily Tattler? I have a huge story to break, she said urgently into the phone. 30 minutes later, a carefully edited and produced video appeared online. In the video, Eleanor was disheveled, her face pale with tear tracks still visible. She pleaded to the camera with tears in her eyes. I'm just an ordinary mother who wants to protect her son, she sobbed. That girl had ulterior motives. From the very beginning when she approached my son. It was all planned. She pretended to be from an ordinary family to gain our trust. What happened at the wedding was our fault, but we were just trying to test her. Who knew she would turn on us on the spot and threaten us with forged evidence? Now she's suing us. This is driving our family to ruin. She portrayed herself as a tragic mother who doted on her son but was tricked by a wicked daughter-in-law. Her words were earnest, her tears came on cue. The video quickly spread on some platforms that didn't know the truth. Instantly, a different narrative began to emerge in the public opinion. This mom is pitiful too. Maybe she's just a bit of a control freak. Could it be that the woman really planned all this? Otherwise, how could she have been so prepared? The world of the rich is complicated. I guess neither side is a good person. Countless malicious comments and speculations flooded my social media like a tidal wave. My assistant Maria held a tablet, her face red with anger. Miss Evans, look at this. This old woman from the Thompson family is shameless. She's twisting the truth and playing the victim. I was at that moment seriously reviewing a project investment return analysis report. Hearing Maria's words, I casually lifted my eyes. My office was on the top floor of the Sterling Tower on Park Avenue with a panoramic view. Warm sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting bright patches of light on the floor. The nameplate on my desk, Chloe Evans, CEO, glittered in the sun. I took the tablet from Maria and quickly scanned the video and the comments below. Eleanor's performance in the video was Oscar-worthy, but unfortunately, she had picked the wrong opponent and the wrong method. In the face of absolute strength and irrefutable evidence, her emotional manipulation was nothing more than a clown's clumsy act. "She's digging her own grave," I said, handing the tablet back to Maria, my tone perfectly calm. "Have Mr. Davies prepare a second letter of demand. Sue Eleanor Thompson for defamation and spreading false information on behalf of both myself personally and the company. Demand a public apology and $2 million in damages for reputational harm. Tell Mr. Davies I want this lawsuit to be a national affair." Maria stared at me, her eyes wide. "But Miss Evans, that will put us at the center of public attention too." I smiled slightly and stood up, walking slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the bustling city below and said, "If she wants to muddy the waters, I'll make the water crystal clear. If she wants to fight a PR war, I'll show her just how terrifying the power of the law is. Besides, our company's next product is about to launch. We can think of this as free national publicity." I stood before everyone, my gaze firm and commanding, and said word by word, "I will show everyone just how miserable the end is for those who try to challenge rules and facts with lies. Public opinion." Maria looked at me with a puzzled expression and asked cautiously, "Miss Evans, are you trying to fight with her?" I shook my head slightly and said, "Seriously, I'm not fighting. I'm giving her and everyone like her a public lesson." Maria tilted her head, curious. "What kind of public lesson, Miss Evans?" I looked at her with a deep gaze and slowly said, "A public lesson on what consequences are." Hearing this, a spark of admiration lit up in Maria's eyes. She nodded vigorously and said loudly, "Understood, Miss Evans. I'll handle it right away." Watching my energetic assistant's retreating figure, I turned back to my desk. I picked up my coffee and took a light sip. The rich aroma of coffee filled my mouth. I looked out the window. The sky was clear, with white clouds drifting lazily by. I curved my lips into a slight smile. The game has only just begun. Over the next few days, public opinion on the internet reversed dramatically, just as I had expected. Mr. Davies' actions were incredibly swift. A scanned copy of the first letter of demand was made public. People gathered around their computers, scrutinizing its contents. The notary's seal and the law firm's stamp were crystal clear, exuding an air of solemnity under the sun. Next, the second letter of demand suing Eleanor Thompson for defamation was delivered directly to the YouTuber's company. The $2 million demand for damages was like a huge boulder dropped into water, causing massive waves. The YouTuber was like an ant on a hot pan, frantically anxious. He immediately deleted the video and issued a public apology. In his statement, he said urgently, "I was deceived by Miss Eleanor Thompson. I will fully cooperate with the investigation." Public opinion completely flipped. The netizens who had previously sympathized with Eleanor now felt they had been made fools of. I knew it. How could a notarized promissory note be a gift? Trying to dodge a $750K debt and then resorting to defamation. This family is rotten to the core. I support Miss Evans. Make those deadbeats and liars pay. The Thompsons became like rats in the street, hated by everyone. I no longer paid any attention to the online clamor. I devoted myself to preparing for the launch of my company's new product. In the office, I discussed plans with colleagues and reviewed product materials. To me, the matter with the Thompson family was a closed chapter. The rest was up to the law. That evening after work, I walked alone to the underground parking garage as usual. The garage was dimly lit, with a faint smell of gasoline in the air. I walked with a steady pace. Just as I reached my parking spot, a dark figure suddenly darted out from behind a pillar and blocked my path. The strong smell of alcohol and the sour stench of someone who hadn't showered in days hit me, almost making me gag. Looking closely, it was Michael. I hadn't seen him in a few days, and he looked like a completely different person. Stubble covered his chin, and his hair was greasy and stuck to his forehead. The designer suit he once wore was now a wrinkled mess with stains on the cuffs. His eyes were bloodshot, and his gaze was filled with a crazed light. He stared at me intently. "Chloe," he said, his voice horribly hoarse. I instinctively took a step back, pointing the sharp end of my car key at him. I said coldly, "Mr. Thompson, we are nothing to each other now." Nothing to each other. A miserable smile appeared on his face. "You ruin everything I have, and now you say we're nothing to each other. My mom is in the hospital because of you. My dad is filing for divorce. My family is completely destroyed. The company's shareholders are pulling their investments. Clients are canceling contracts. The bank is demanding loan repayments. Everyone looks at me like I'm a bug. I have nothing left. Are you happy, Chloe? Are you satisfied now?" He became more and more agitated, taking a step toward me. I didn't back down. I looked at him coldly. I didn't cause any of this. Your and your mother's greed did. When you humiliated me at the wedding, you should have known this day would come. Greedy, I'm greedy. He looked as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world, his eyes widening. Can you say you're not cunning? You planned everything from the beginning, didn't you? You were waiting for me to become a laughingstock, you snake. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm tightly. His strength was immense. Give me the money. No, give me that $7.5 million in stock. If you give it to me, I'll forgive you. We can start over, just like before, he shouted, having completely lost his mind. I looked at him and suddenly felt a wave of pity. Even at this point, all he could think about was that money. Just as I was about to use my self-defense training to break free, a calm, powerful voice came from a distance. Sir, I suggest you let go of Miss Evans right now. Looking toward the source of the voice, I saw a tall man walking slowly toward us. He was wearing a well-tailored dark gray suit, his gait relaxed yet powerful, his presence commanding. In the dim light of the parking garage, his facial features were sharp and handsome. His eyes were deep and penetrating. I recognized him, Julian Croft, the lead investor in our company's Series B funding round, a legendary figure in the venture capital world. We had only met once at the contract signing ceremony. Michael must have felt the pressure emanating from him, but he was already out of his mind. Instead of letting go, he gripped me even tighter. Who are you? Mind your own business. Julian Croft didn't stop. He walked right up to us. He was a head taller than Michael. He didn't even look at Michael, but his brow furrowed slightly as he looked at my captured arm. I'll say it one more time. Let go. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority. Whether it was his imposing presence or something else, Michael's grip loosened instinctively. In that instant, two uniformed security guards rushed out from behind Julian and firmly grabbed Michael's arms. Ma'am, are you all right? One of the guards asked. It turned out Julian had already contacted the security center. Michael struggled, madly cursing. You bastards, let me go! Julian didn't even glance at him but said coldly to the guards, Call the police! Intentional approach and intimidation. At the mention of the police, Michael went limp as if all his strength had drained away. His face was pale with terror. The guards mercilessly dragged him away. The parking garage was quiet again. Julian walked over to me and asked Miss Evans, are you all right? His gaze fell on the red marks on my arm and his eyes grew cold. I shook my head and said, I'm fine, Mr. Croft. Thank you so much for today. Not at all, Julian said, looking at me with a complex yet appreciative expression. I heard about what happened at the wedding. You handled it very well. He paused, then took a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. You don't need to dirty your hands with trash like that. If you run into any trouble in the future, call this number directly. I took the card. It had only his name and phone number. It's late. Allow me to see you home. His offer was natural and sincere, making it impossible to refuse. I looked at him then at the distant figure of Michael being dragged away like a dog. One represented my messy, shameful past. The other seemed to herald a brand new beginning. I nodded and said softly, Okay. Julian's car was a black Bentley exuding a low-key, luxurious power. I got in. The car was filled with a faint, pleasant scent of leather and cedarwood, not the cloying perfume Michael used to douse his car in. We didn't speak much on the way. I looked at the neon signs outside the window, replaying the scene in my mind, Michael's crazed look, Julian's calm demeanor, and his decisive words, call the police. This man's way of handling things was similar to mine, calm, efficient, and direct. Miss Evans, I've always been very optimistic about your company. Julian suddenly broke the silence. Your team's execution is strong, the tech roadmap is clear, and the business model is solid. Especially you as the founder, your decisiveness and long-term vision are excellent. He never once mentioned the unpleasant incident just now, or the failed wedding. There was no pity in his eyes. His focus was solely on my company, my work, my ability. At that moment, a strange feeling washed over me. I was no longer a tragic heroine. I was an entrepreneur recognized by a top investor. His respect made me feel more at ease than any words of comfort could. I said sincerely, Thank you for your recognition, Mr. Croft. The final testing for the new product went smoothly, and the data feedback is very positive. We're scheduled for an official launch next Monday. Julian nodded. I've seen your marketing plan. It's good. But in terms of channel diversification, especially in emerging overseas markets, you could be bolder. He began to discuss specific market strategies with me in detail. I have a few potential partners in mind. His insights were profound, his logic meticulous. I found myself completely engrossed in a high-level business discussion with him. This exhilarating feeling was something I had never experienced with Michael. Michael knew nothing about my work and made no effort to understand it. But Julian, in just 10 minutes, had accurately pointed out the blind spots in my plan and offered constructive suggestions. He was someone who truly understood me. When the car stopped in front of my apartment complex, I realized we had arrived. I unbuckled my seatbelt and said sincerely, "Mr. Croft, thank you so much for today. Not just for helping me, but for this valuable conversation." Julian turned to look at me, his deep eyes shining in the night. He curved his lips into a slight smile. "I was just protecting my investment. A brilliant CEO is the most valuable asset in any project." He then added with a smile, "Keep that card safe. I don't want my asset to be exposed to unnecessary risks again." He gave me a slight nod and said no more. I got out of the car and closed the door. The Bentley silently disappeared into the night. I stood there clutching the high-quality business card. The name Julian Croft on it seemed to carry a warm weight. I suddenly realized that when I had forcefully shut the old decaying door infested with termites, another door leading to a new world was slowly opening before me. And behind that door stood a man who was my equal, or perhaps even stronger. Michael was released from the police station at dawn. He staggered out the faint light of the street lamps, illuminating his lonely figure. He hadn't faced any real punishment, but the experience of being dragged away by security and interrogated by the police had completely crushed his last shred of dignity. He returned home in a daze. The moment he opened the door, he was met with his father Robert's furious roar. "You still have the face to come back." Before he could react, his father slapped him across the face. Half his face swelled up instantly, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Robert was trembling with rage. "You useless piece of trash." As if embarrassing. "Our family wasn't enough. Do you know who called me tonight? The legal team from Orion Capital. They warned me to keep you away from Chloe Evans." Orion Capital. Which Orion Capital? Michael's mind went blank. Robert was so angry at the son's pathetic state that he yelled, "Which Orion Capital? Could it be Julian Croft's Orion Capital, the one that dominates the venture capital industry?" The name Julian Croft struck Michael's mind like a bolt of lightning. He looked up, stunned. The man who helped Chloe at the wedding. Who else could it be? Robert's voice was filled with despair and regret. "Michael, you idiot, do you know who you've messed with? Julian Croft is someone we can't even dream of touching. With a flick of his finger, he could make our Thompson family disappear from this city completely." Michael staggered backward until he hit the cold wall. All the strength drained from his body, and he slid down the wall to the floor. He buried his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. Tears mixed with blood dripped onto the floor. He finally understood. Chloe Evans was never the easy target he and his mother had imagined. She had $7.5 million in stock, the ability to earn the respect of someone like Julian Croft, and enough power and backing to play him and the Thompson family in the palm of her hand. Their meticulously planned trap was a joke from the very beginning. The 10 condos they were so proud of were insignificant in the face of Chloe's true strength. "I was wrong. I was so wrong," he muttered incoherently. But it was too late for regrets. Just then, the bedroom door opened, and Eleanor, wearing a hospital gown and looking deathly pale, walked out. She had just snuck out of the hospital. She had heard the entire argument in the living room, and when she heard the name Julian Croft, her body froze and the last bit of color drained from her face. She had thought she was the master of this family, that she could calculate everything, but in the end, she had calculated herself and her entire family into a dead end. "Chloe." "No, Miss Evans," Eleanor's voice trembled. She walked to the center of the living room, looked at her cowering son and her despairing husband, and suddenly dropped to her knees. "I was wrong. It was all my fault. I must have been possessed. I was greedy. I ruined this family. I ruined Michael. Please tell Miss Evans, tell Mr. Croft, to give us another chance." She kowtowed, banging her head on the floor as she cried. Her forehead swelled and bled, but she didn't seem to notice, just kept begging. The once elegant matriarch was gone, replaced by a pathetic, hysterical wreck. Robert looked at his wife and son and fell into despair. He slowly sank to the floor, buried his head in his hands, and let out a helpless sigh. He knew the Thompson family was truly finished. A few days later, a court summons was formally delivered to the Thompson residence. Chloe's lawyer, as promised, had applied to the court for an asset preservation order, and the Thompsons' properties, Michael's company accounts, and vehicles were all legally frozen. At the same time, company shareholders withdrew their investments, clients canceled contracts, and the bank demanded loan repayments. Robert had no choice but to divorce Eleanor and divide their remaining assets, but it was a drop in the bucket against their massive debts. Eleanor, under prolonged anxiety, anger, and self-blame, had a complete mental breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Michael was truly alone. He was fired from his company, shunned by relatives and friends, and pointed at by neighbors. To pay off his debts, he had to take on manual labor jobs, barely managing to survive. Meanwhile, Chloe had completely emerged from the shadow of the fiasco and started a new life of her own. Her company's new product was a resounding success, becoming a hit both domestically and internationally, and the company's valuation surpassed $100 million. She had transformed into a confident, independent entrepreneur. Julian Croft became an indispensable part of her life. They didn't rush into a romantic relationship but grew together as friends and partners, respecting and supporting each other. Their relationship was a great source of comfort and strength for both of them. One afternoon, as Chloe was leaving after closing a major deal, she saw Julian leaning against his Bentley waiting for her. A gentle smile played on his lips. "Mr. Croft, what are you doing here?" Chloe asked, smiling as she walked over. "I was just passing by and thought I'd pick you up," Julian said, naturally taking her briefcase. "I heard the deal went smoothly today." "Congratulations, Chloe," he added. "We're having a little celebration tonight, just the two of us. My treat." Chloe was surprised for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "Okay." The car drove smoothly through the city streets. The golden light of dusk streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on the two of them. The car was quiet and comfortable. Chloe looked at the scenery outside, a smile on her lips. She thought back to the ridiculous wedding and the greed of the Thompsons, but now all those negative feelings had vanished like smoke. That slap in the face had completely awakened her, making her realize that a woman's true reliance is not on marriage or love, but on her own strength and confidence. The car stopped in front of an elegant restaurant. Julian got out and opened the door for her. "Miss Evans, after you." Chloe smiled and took his offered hand. His hand was warm and strong. The restaurant was filled with soft lighting and music. Julian pulled out a chair for her. "Chloe," he said, looking at her with serious eyes, "the past is all behind us. I hope that from now on you can let go of it, love yourself, and live well. And I will always be by your side, supporting you, protecting you, and walking with you toward a better future." Chloe's eyes welled up at his sincere gaze and gentle words. She nodded vigorously. "I will, Julian. Thank you. I will live well, love myself, and try to accept you." A bright smile spread across Julian's face. He gently took her hand. "Thank you, Chloe. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't disappoint you." The evening sun cast a golden glow over them, stretching their shadows long. Outside the window, the city lights glittered, and inside, two souls who understood each other held hands, walking toward a future filled with hope and happiness. No one cared about the fate of the Thompson family anymore. They had paid the price for their greed and calculations, becoming the most insignificant laughingstock in the city, eventually disappearing into the vast sea of people without a trace. Everything had returned to its rightful place. Chloe had finally broken free from the shackles of the past, shining brilliantly in her own world. And those who had hurt her were ultimately trapped in the nightmare of their own making for the rest of their lives. That's just how life is. Sometimes a sudden storm is not a disaster, but a chance for rebirth. It makes you see through the hearts of people, recognize yourself, and become stronger and braver. It makes you realize that only by being strong yourself can you overcome anything, and only by moving toward the sun can you live a life without regret.